Hello, and welcome to WINNOW, a couple's close reading of the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm Owen Gemmer.
I'm Isabella Gemmer. We are married and we love to talk about books together.
Yes, we are in this podcast talking about Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and this particular episode is about Book 4 of the Iliad.
Yep, Book 4. It is when the fighting really begins.
Yes. Last episode, obviously, we talked a lot about the duel between Paris and Menelaus, which is the first kind of direct conflict, but it's just kind of this one-on-one duel. But now the full forces are fighting one another, and so bloodshed is rampant, especially towards the end. But we have to get there first. We're going to start with a little summary game where we go back and forth sentence by sentence and try and summarize kind of all the main events of the book before we dive into some discussion and analysis.
Book 4 opens on it opens on a scene in Mount Olympus, and Zeus is talking very loudly, and all the other gods are assembled.
Yes, there's great debate over whether to allow the duel to sort of end the war because Menelaus technically won, or whether to figure out some loophole to allow the fighting to continue.
Hera and Athena are pretty grumbly about this, and Hera is the one who decides to speak up. She is basically like, I've been really working to destroy Troy, and I can't have you getting in the way of my plans. I put so much effort into running this city into the ground. This is my time, and we need to let the war continue.
Yes. And so they eventually come up with this plan where Athena goes down into the armies in a disguise, and she speaks to Pandarus, who is one of the Trojan archers.
Yes, Athena whispers in Pandarus's ear. She's like, she comes in a disguise as just a regular Trojan warrior. She's basically like, if you get your bow out and you shoot Menelaus, then all your Trojan buddies are gonna think you're really cool.
Yeah.
So you should do it.
And being very susceptible to this lie, he does so. He pulls out his bow, he draws it back, he shoots it all the way across all the armies, and it strikes Menelaus.
And it doesn't fatally hit him, because Athena then goes over to Menelaus and she guides the arrow so that it lands. Basically, it kind of embeds itself right in his belt buckle.
So the belt protects him from it being a piercing blow, but it sort of cuts him. So he's like bleeding a lot. And Agamemnon, his brother, is like, "You're bleeding. You've been hit. Treachery. But first we got to get you a doctor. So let's go call the doctor because you're bleeding."
Yeah, they summon a doctor over to remove the arrow and put ointments on it probably. And then Agamemnon is like, we're doing this. We're fighting now.
They have broken their vows, and the oath has been shattered, and so we must now destroy them.
Yeah. And so Agamemnon goes out physically. We get a montage almost of him going troop to troop, basically employing various tactics to get people amped up to fight.
And then we just get a lot of battle sequences. It kind of transitions into what many of these books of the Iliad are and what many people are used to, of just kind of like descriptions of battle where people are throwing spears and stones and arrows at one another and dying left and right.
That's it. I think that might be our quickest summary yet.
Yeah. There's obviously a couple of big picture things to talk about with this that are, again, reflections of broader themes in the book. And one of those that comes up often, but is especially relevant here, is the way that the gods yet again kind of interfere and intervene in the actions of the mortals.
Yeah. The discussion, it's not really a discussion, the kind of, the just very antagonistic words that Zeus and Hera share. It's not very analytical. It's not very like, well, if we do this, then this will be the repercussions and this will happen over here. But if we do this, then this will happen. And so they're not really being they're not cautious. They're not weighing their options. Someone will just declare, this is what I want. And then someone else will say, no, I want this other thing. And then someone will acquiesce. But they remember. They're like, oh, but I am going to remember that I let you have this so that later you can let me have something else.
So then they end up making deals with one another. In this book, right, we see Hera make this deal of like, hey, if you let me destroy Troy, I'll let you destroy one of my favorite cities. And then she like lists some of her favorite cities and be like, anytime in the future, I owe you. Kill one of them.
Yeah. You can destroy any of these 3 cities that I hold dear.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think like a lot of scholars and people who read this, like they talk about how the gods basically treat the mortals like they're toy soldiers. And I think it's a really accurate description. I think that's a common sort of way of describing this because it does feel like the gods are like children on a playground, like playing war games with the mortals. And like, yeah, like the arguments are really petty. The way that they talk to one another is really kind of not carefully considered. It's not actual strategy. It's just like, oh, I want my soldiers to come kill your soldiers. And,
Yeah. And in contrast to that, we'll get to Agamemnon's pep talk style a little bit in a second here, but there are some moments when he's trying to rouse some troops. He says things like, Zeus is on our side, or he'll really make it seem like he knows that the gods intend good things for them. And it really doesn't seem like he can know that.
Right. We can't know that, even though we as the reader kind of have this objective narrative perspective. Like in some ways we are more omniscient than the gods because we see both what the gods are thinking and what the humans are thinking, yet even we can't ever be able to predict or make heads or tails of what the gods are going to do next. And so it's really frustrating. Like I found this section really hard to read because I find myself glazing over all of the conversations among the gods because I'm just so convinced that like it doesn't matter. Like it's so frustrating. And I can't imagine living in the world with your entire fate being up to the caprices of these gods, where even for me as a modern reader, it's like boring to listen to simply because I know it could change at any moment.
Yeah, I'm having the experience of whenever a conversation or a scene between the gods is happening on, I assume Mount Olympus usually. I want to be serious about it. I'm like, oh, this is the time when the gods are going to talk. I need to pay attention to this. But then I realize, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to. This is not the get serious time. This is like, they're almost like these little cutaways to like the sitcom.
Right.
So I'm starting to read them as more like, I'm trying to read them as funny little cutaways.
Yeah.
And funny moments of reprieve almost.
Right.
To just be like, haha, these guys are crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Because it in some ways reminds me of like when people complain about like Game of Thrones that like George R. R. Martin just kills off characters whenever he wants to with no reason. I don't think that's true of George R. R. Martin. I think he's a better writer than that. I think there is reason for it. But I think many readers feel the same way about George R. R. Martin that I think these mortals might feel about the gods. Is like at any moment, like any of these characters could die and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just like up to the whims of this sort of puppet master who's doing whatever he wants. Another way that, again, if I put myself in the shoes of one of these soldiers or even just somebody living kind of in this world, one thing that would also be insanely, I think, destabilizing for my psyche would be the fact that these gods appear to mortals disguised as other mortals that are like often their friends or their like cousin or something like that. Like, right, Athena comes down to Pandarus disguised as somebody that he knows because Athena knows, oh, he'll trust the advice of this person. And so I'm just going to pretend. And so there's all this like deception happening.
Yes.
I, as a consumer of media, am an absolute sucker for any story where there's like, you know, Mission Impossible pulling off the mask or doppelgangers or like in Marvel, the Skrulls that can shapeshift. I think those are fascinating stories, but I think I'm so fascinated because it's actually so scary. Like any potential that I think of that like somebody is not who they say they are, like I'm gripped because that's such a that's such a crazy idea that like I can't even trust that the person I'm talking to is the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And I think, well, like it's interesting. I somewhat feel like a hypocrite where I'm saying like I'm so enthralled by these stories, and yet in this particular instance, I'm actually kind of like bored by it. And I think the major difference is because we have this kind of more omniscient perspective. We see the gods. We know the whole time that it's Athena going in disguise as this to do this thing, and so there's not actually suspense, right? Like in Mission Impossible or in these, Battlestar Galactica or the Marvel movies, or like the best moments are the ones where like we ourselves didn't know who was who, and then the reveal comes off and you're like, oh my gosh, it was him the whole time. But that requires knowledge to be hidden from the viewer, and I think Homer's style is to give us as much knowledge as possible about what the gods are thinking and doing, and so it just doesn't feel suspenseful when I see Athena go, because obviously Athena's going to get her way.
Yeah. It's also interesting as we get into the Odyssey, eventually, Athena very often visits Odysseus, but she'll even come in disguise, but Odysseus always knows it's Athena.
Yeah.
So at least in the Odyssey, Odysseus is like, has the same amount of knowledge that the reader does or the listener. So in those cases, it's actually really gratifying because you're always like, yeah, Odysseus, you know what's up.
Yeah. And then similarly, there's the really, I think, awesome question that we'll get to ponder as to how soon, if at all, Penelope figures out that Odysseus is in disguise when he's in disguise. Yeah. Like when in the conversation does she sort of figure out like, no, this is my husband. Yeah. Like when it's that sort of, there's a little bit of mystery to it, it gets really exciting. But when it's just kind of laid out, Athena is this person is stupid, and he's going to fall for the trick, and then the war's going to happen. It's like, okay, cool.
But it is kind of still exciting. Like the first shot gets shot.
Yeah.
And even more exciting, Menelaus, he almost got shot in his manhood.
Yeah. I was reading that description. It's like, ooh, the belt buckle is,
real close there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, like in a movie when you're watching a movie, maybe in a movie theater, and like some guy gets kicked in the nuts and you just hear all the men in the audience go, like I think that's kind of what everyone would have done when they heard that. They would have been like, ooh, ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As the battle is now about to begin, you had earlier mentioned that you had some interesting thoughts about Agamemnon's kind of pep talk and leadership styles. Do you want to talk through some of those?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a montage. He goes from sort of, main leader to main leader. He kind of goes down the line, I would assume. It's really interesting that the text mentions how he goes on foot. Mm-hmm. He doesn't take a chariot, or it's like he gives instructions for the chariot to be near in case he needs it, I think, in case he gets tired. But at least for the meantime, he's like, I'm setting out on foot to do this, which is cool. It's not something I would expect from. I would expect Agamemnon to be like chariot, chariot rider all the way. But he goes person to person, and he kind of employs different tactics to get them, motivated. For some people, he is super complimentary. With like Nestor, who's the older guy, he's very like, you are so old and wise. I'm so glad you're here. And so for some people, he really compliments them to get them excited. But then for other people, he uses reverse psychology where he's like, you need to be better. You really need to step it up. And they're like, yeah, we do. We're going to do the best job ever, Agamemnon. And then it's super funny when he tries that with Odysseus and someone else who I'm forgetting, but they're not on the front lines. They're kind of back a little bit. And he's like, you guys, you need to, why are you back here? You're going to let other guys go first? This is disgraceful.
Yeah.
And Odysseus doesn't take it from him. He's like, please, okay, don't tell me what to do. And then there's literally a line. Let me find it. Yeah, Odysseus is like, blah, 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 blah. You are talking nonsense. That's what he says to Agamemnon. Then Agamemnon is like, oh, yes, you are so full of clever schemes and plots. I will not scold or blame you, not too much, or give you orders. He's like, okay, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You got this.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was someone else who he was like, your father was a better warrior than you. Like,
Yeah.
he's trying to use reverse psychology on this one guy.
Yeah, that's with Diomedes. Yeah, he's like,
Yeah.
Tydeus was such a great warrior, and like he would be ashamed to have a son like you who's so hesitant to go into battle.
Yeah. And he's like, we both know I'm stronger than my father.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah.
And I think that particular example is interesting as a bit of foreshadowing and spoiler that Diomedes is going to go be one of the people who goes on a rampage. He's like possessed by one of the goddesses. I don't remember exactly, but it might be next book, might be a couple. But yeah, he like becomes in Achilles' stead. He becomes one of the main fighters. I'm curious, given, I think that your observation of Agamemnon's kind of shifting rhetorical strategies is pretty spot on. Does that make you like Agamemnon more or like him less because he's sort of shifty and inconsistent?
I think in this chapter, we're getting the best example of what kind of leader Agamemnon is.
Yeah, I agree.
So when Agamemnon is being a successful leader, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, because he is trying to understand what each of his people needs in order to be motivated. And he's not taking a one-size-fits-all approach. Like as a teacher, like there's students who need different kinds of motivation. Some students respond really well to like, oh, that wasn't as good as you could have done. Like you can do better next time. Some students are crippled by that and they need the sort of more positive. And it's a real art to be able to know what does this person need at this moment in order to sort of go beyond what they're currently capable of doing. And so, I read this as the first and very positive aspect of Agamemnon's character that makes me, feel a little bit bad for being so critical of him in the past.
I think we can also see he's motivated to start fighting because the oath has been broken, like transgressed. And his brother, who he will ride or die for Menelaus, and Menelaus has been wounded, in his belt buckle.
Yeah.
So I think
his thighs are covered with blood.
Yeah. So his brother's bleeding, and I think that maybe brings out the best in Agamemnon.
And I do think, again, like the narrator notes a couple different times throughout this that like Achilles isn't there. There's again this constant reminder that like we need to be extra good because our best guy is on the sidelines over there. And so I think all those combinations of the motivation really help sort of spur on the Greek army. But I'm curious, given all of this, do you find yourself like when the fighting then really begins rooting for the Greeks? Because I find it really interesting to think about my emotional reaction to the battle, who I feel like I'm siding with, or if I even feel like I should be siding with one group or the other.
I think we're still getting more information on our main heroes. And I think the way that Agamemnon goes and talks to all these individual guys reminds me again who our main players are and who to pay attention to. Because when the fighting kind of starts happening all abruptly and, random guys are kind of going down.
Yeah.
And it's the descriptions can be quite graphic and like, it gets really bloody really fast. But my main guys are still fine.
So is it the fact that like we know more main characters on the Greek side than we do on the Trojan side? And so is that at this point enough to make you sort of feel like you end up favoring the Greeks more just because like we know more about more of them? Whereas, on the Trojan side, we know about Paris, but he's a skis ball. We know about Priam. We like Priam, but
he's not fighting.
We know about Helen. We like Helen, but she's not fighting. So Hector's really the only Trojan who's fighting that we know about and that we at least have some indication that like maybe we should like them. Yeah. Whereas on the Greek side, there are many more people that we've gotten to know a little better.
Yeah, but Hector only came up super briefly, like in one line in this chapter. I think that this chapter was kind of like, it was the fighting from the Greeks' perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. So far, I guess I'm rooting for the Greeks, but that's just because I haven't gotten a lot of descriptions of what's happening. With the Trojans.
Yeah, and I think for me, again, I mentioned earlier that I found this chapter kind of more boring than most of the others, despite the fact that there is much more quote unquote action and bloodshed and things like that. And I think when I was trying to figure out why, I think part of it is because I don't feel like I know the stakes as clearly because it's not really clear good guys, bad guys in the way that I think we're often used to in modern storytelling.
Yeah.
And so in book 3, when it's the duel, like the stakes there are very clear. And it's also very easy to see Paris as a scumbag. And so it's kind of really easy to feel invested in that fight because we know the two characters. We know Paris, we know Menelaus, we know the stakes because we've met Helen and her reaction to that. And it's very kind of contained. Whereas in this, when it's way back to the entire armies, it's kind of like, I'm not really that invested in either side. And so it feels kind of hard to really latch on to the stakes of the battle.
Yeah. I've never found battle scenes, descriptions of battle scenes in general to be the most engaging. But I think that's where like the Lord of the Rings movies do a really good job of battle scenes because there's a battle and a big skirmish happening and you see that in the surrounding areas, but our main characters get sort of mini bosses or mini tasks that they have to complete within all of this fighting sort of happening around them.
Yeah.
So that's why like at least in this chapter, we get a little aside. There's the moment where one of Odysseus's buddies gets killed.
Yes. Most of the characters who are killed, right, are unnamed, or they're only named for the first time when they die.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know them until they're dead, and then we get to know them and their backstory and who their father was and all that. But their only noteworthy feature is that they were killed in book 4 or whatever.
Yeah. But we do get one of Odysseus's buddies killed. And then I get to see that death through Odysseus's eyes. And Odysseus is one of the guys that I feel like I know. And so if I can feel his emotions seeing the death, instead of just me reading it, I don't feel as much. But if I get to see it through his eyes, then it impacts me more.
Yeah. Will you read the description of Odysseus seeing that? Because I think it is interesting.
So around line 495 in the Greek, Laochus was dragging the body in the opposite direction. Antiphus struck his groin and made him drop the body. At the slaughter of his comrade, Odysseus was furious and heartsick. And then it goes on to describe how Odysseus gets angry, like fully equipped in bright bronze helm and armor. He strode among the champions and stopped near to the killer, glancing all around, then hurled his shining spear at him. The Trojans drew back as he attacked. His weapon hit somebody, but it was Democune, the son of Priam, fathered out of wedlock, blah, 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 blah. It's more impactful to hear like Odysseus was, furious, heartsick, feeling these emotions. And he just like grabs the nearest spear and just hurls it at, the guy he thinks is responsible. And, it misses him, but it hits someone else. Those emotions are more impactful than the descriptions of like, oh, so-and-so hit someone in the temple so hard it went through his skull and came out the other side. That kind of stuff is like, it's gross, but I want the emotions.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, and so this leads us to our segment, Greek Time.
It's Greek time. Pew, 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 pew.
Where we looked into the description of Odysseus's kind of emotional reaction here.
Well, because I was in the Wilson translation, it's furious and heartsick. And so I was wondering if the word furious was potentially related to rage. That's kind of why I thought it might be interesting. Or if it's something else entirely, which I think it might be.
Yeah, it is different. There's some interesting vocabulary involved here. But basically, there's a construction where there's a verb. So Odysseus was angered. Then there's a participle that's basically, I think it's being used as like a genitive of agency. So he was angered as a result of the killing, basically, of his friend. And he was angered to the point of then 2 words, mala thumon. So mala is the adverb that we would use as like very or extremely. And then thumon is one of these Greek words that the dictionary entry is like a full page long. So it can get used in a ton of different ways, not just by Homer, but it's really important for understanding Plato as well. So the most generic translation is spirit. And, we could do probably a whole podcast episode on like Greek understandings of the soul and the mind and the heart and the spirit and these kinds of things. So in English are confusing and often used interchangeably as well. And so the same thing is true in the Greek, where your thumos was, at least in Plato, was understood as kind of the seat of your emotions. Like it was separate from your logismos, your logic, your reasoning. Your thumos was where your emotions were. And so it can be used generally to describe emotions, but oftentimes is used to describe anger, which is one of the most extreme and I think most viscerally felt emotions. And so, if you are taking it super literally, the smala thumon is really just like Odysseus was made very emotional. But that often is then interpreted, especially given the context of this, to be extremely angry or spirited or like full of strong emotion, basically.
It is often associated with anger, but can't it also be associated with, I think, like intense sadness as well? I almost wonder if it's related to any emotion that you like can really feel like in your chest.
Yeah.
In a sense. Like it almost has not just feelings as in emotions that we generally think are felt in the head, but it really taps into that feeling of literally feeling emotions in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other piece of evidence along that line to the physicalness of the anger, the verb that's used as like he was kind of provoked is koloo, which is related to kolos, which is where we get the English word choler. Which, again, this would be another whole tangent to sort of ancient medicine's understanding of the humors, but choler was one of the humors. And so you can be translated as like bile or gall, oftentimes sort of in modern scientific understanding of things. And so the verb is like he was filled with gall, which means he was angry because, again, like
one of his humors was rising, kind of.
Right. Yeah. And the humor that is, responsible for anger and these kinds of things. And so, I think it's pretty clear that there's a couple things at play. There is anger, right? Like it is negative emotion. It is strong emotion, right? It is extreme. It is the sort of highest height of this emotion. And it is physically like manifested. Like it's a visceral, not just this like intellectual, like, oh, I'm mad at this person. It's like the deep chested,
Which
anger
is why
that rises up.
Yeah, I like the translation of furious and heartsick because the furious implies the anger part, and then the heartsickness really implies that like the bad feeling in the chest.
Right.
So both those words together can really do a good job.
Right. Yeah, and like we in the modern day understand heartsick as like sad.
Yeah, heartbroken.
Right. And I think there would be this, right? Like if his friend died, there is an aspect of that, but that the heart sickness manifests itself as anger, and I want to get revenge rather than like I'm going to go eat ice cream and cry.
Yeah. Because actually, not that far after Odysseus is furious and heartsick, someone reminds us that Achilles is not here. He's sitting on his own, ripening his anger to cause more heart sickness. That's around line 515 in the Greek. And I wonder if that's also thumos.
Ooh, yeah. Okay. So this word that's describing Achilles is thumalges, which is a compound of thumos, and then algeo, which is to cause woe or pain. So again, this will come up in the Odyssey. Nostalgia in English is nostos, which is homecoming, and then algia, which is pain. So nostalgia is pain for homecoming. And so this is pain in the heart. So like heart grieving or,
Yeah. So that one is more...
Or in the thumos, right? I think that's actually important. There is a separate word, cardia, like a cardiology for the actual organ of the heart. Thumos is definitely not seen as like a physical part of your body.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual or soul or, again, like it's complicated.
Yeah. But this word describing Achilles emphasizes more sadness.
Right. Pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, like if you know modern medicine, an analgesic is a painkiller, and is contrary to algaea is pain. So analgesics are those that relieve pain.
Yeah.
Related to the same word. So yeah, spirit pain, which is different than the sort of collar that Odysseus has.
Yeah. Anger pain.
Right.
Is different. Yeah.
But they're both related to the thumos. They kind of happen in the same place. But it's interesting, right? Pain often leads to anger, but there's another moment here where pain doesn't actually lead to anger. It leads to positive reactions. So you had found another really interesting simile that I think is a good oblique angle to sort of get us a different path where we often see, right, like death and injury leading to anger and negative emotions. But there's a different moment earlier where the opposite is true.
Yes. So for our oblique angle, our deep questions part of this pod, I wanted to talk about the Homeric simile. So when Menelaus gets struck in the belt buckle, and I guess essentially his pubic bone is bleeding, there is, I'll just read this Homeric simile. It starts at around line 140 in the Greek. At once the wound gushed blood as black as clouds, as when a woman from Maeonia or Korea stains ivory with purple to make a horse's cheek piece, which is stored inside an inner chamber, and great numbers of charioteers are longing to possess it, but it is saved as treasure for a king, a beautiful decoration for a horse, and glory for the driver. Menelaus, so were your handsome thighs all stained with blood, so were your handsome calves and shapely ankles. Not only does that end with a banger with the thighs, the calves, and the shapely ankles, but Menelaus has been wounded, so he's bleeding, but he is not mortally wounded. And so it's being compared to a thing that is like highly decorative and prized.
Right. And purple being a royal color because purple dye was really expensive and worthy. Yeah. And so he's being adorned by his blood and it is, like elevating him. Yeah. Yeah, I think the other interesting aspect of that too is in addition to the simile, it transitions from that simile to the apostrophe, right? Like it kind of addresses Menelaus directly. That's actually pretty rare in Homer where the narrator addresses a specific character in this way.
Yeah, it happens just earlier in this chunk of text. The narrator is like, but Menelaus, you were not forgotten by the deathless gods.
Yeah.
And then goes on to describe how Athena pushes the arrow so that it only wounds him in a specific place.
Yeah. Can I read part of I won't read all of Chapman's I won't read all of the simile in Chapman's, but there's an interesting, this apostrophe here. O Menelaus, down thy calves and ankles to the ground, for nothing decks a soldier so as doth an honored wound. I think that's, Chapman being extra flourishing, but this idea, like nothing decks a soldier so as doth an honored wound, that like actually if you're injured but not killed, that is a sign of honor for a soldier. Obviously to die in battle is often great shame because you failed, but if you get injured, it's like, oh great, you're gonna have a scar and like you're
although I don't know about you, but I always think about how they did not have antibiotics. Like whenever I hear about anyone getting like a little cut at all in any sort of historical context, I'm like, oh, okay.
Sepsis.
I'm like, oh, okay. Really take care of that. Really, really keep it clean.
But that is why, like, before the battle starts, Agamemnon is like, yo, go get the doctor to come put, like herbs on it and everything like that. It seems to be a priority because, I think that's another factor, right? You read some of these death scenes and oftentimes it's like the person got stabbed in the shoulder and fell to the ground.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, getting stabbed in the shoulder isn't like fatal right away. But like, I think we're meant to picture like oftentimes these soldiers are probably lying there dying like for a couple hours. Yeah. Like the wound's getting infected or they're bleeding out or something like that. That like very, very often a lot of these deaths are not quick and they are not sort of instant. Sometimes they are. And Homer emphasizes that like, he got crushed by the skull with a rock or something like that and died immediately. But very often I think think we're meant to picture the prolonged suffering that happens as a result of this kind of warfare.
Something that will come up time and time again when reading these fight scenes is that the places that people get stabbed in their chest is usually described in relationship to their nipples.
Yeah.
But it's funny, but it's also important because it's not just so-and-so got stabbed in like the upper shoulder, like in the collarbone, but because your nipple is a little bit down, being stabbed just to the left of your nipple means like, oh, that guy got stabbed in his lung or his heart.
Right.
Using that language of like, it's in the important part of the chest.
Right.
So it really emphasizes that guy is done.
Yeah. And I imagine, again, I'm not an expert on Bronze Age warfare, but I'm guessing these descriptions are also more understandable if you know how their armor works, that like, right, like, oh, that direction of the spear going in is a chink in common armor or something like that. Yeah, because this part is probably easy to protect, right? Like your upper chest is easy to just put a flat piece of metal over there, but it's kind of like along the sides where you need the motion that there's probably chinks in the armor that are easy to get a spear through. And then,
Yeah. But a lot of these guys do get hit in like the breastplate area. I'm not sure that they were wearing any sort of metal.
True.
I imagine that it was probably leather. It goes hard enough that it goes through the leather and pierces them.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think...
I'm just making all this up, by the way. Yeah, like I have no idea how any of this...
Maybe I'll do some research and I'll get back to the pod on this because I would be interested to know.
On like how their armor worked and all that.
Yeah. And if some people were wearing metal, it was definitely not everyone.
That's true.
So all the red shirts... They're more like the leather shirts.
Yeah.
They were not wearing metal.
Yeah. And I think that, but this is an interesting thing to bring up because we do get actually pretty explicit descriptions of when somebody goes down fighting over the body, which I think is oftentimes mentioned for different reasons, but two different reasons, either like to protect the body for proper burial or to protect their armor or to steal their armor, right? Like they're fighting over the body because taking somebody's armor was a sign of like your prize, like I have conquered this person. Yeah. And so if your buddy goes down, you want to protect his body so that you can bury it and so that the killer doesn't get the armor. And if you've just killed somebody, if you can also get in and get their armor, then like double win.
Yeah. And again, if you want to read a great book where taking people's highly coveted armor is a main part of the story, then you're going to want to read The Way of Kings.
Yeah, I mean, so right. I think the way that this simile reflects, again, the overall themes of this book is, again, the potential glory that can come from warfare. Because I think, right, if we go way back to the beginning with the gods all fighting over whether to allow the war to continue or to let the duel sort of end it, I think, you know, we talked about this last week where in some ways, if the duel just goes straight up and one person kills the other and then the war ends, that's kind of anticlimactic. And there's a lot of people who lose out on the potential for glory and honor because they didn't actually get to sack the whole city. And so in this world, like the actual act of conquering is itself a prize beyond simply the spoils that you get from it. And so that just, I think it's important to know how important that was for these people to like have that legacy of, I have done this thing, I have conquered this person or this city. And that's a good thing. Like if you are injured in that process, there are going to be more stories told about you. You'll have the scar, you'll get an epithet maybe, right? Like now Menelaus of the bloody thighs or something like that.
Menelaus of the wounded mons. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we end it there?
I feel like that's it. I feel like we talked about it.
Yeah. Maybe we just briefly talk about the last line of the last couple lines of the book where basically the narrator steps back and is describing the entirety of the battlefield where like basically nobody would want to walk along this battlefield unless Athena were with him to sort of stave off all the arrows and spears that are flying around because there were just like so many bodies all laid out face down upon the earth. Yeah. And so the book ends with just this like sort of bird's eye view picture of the battlefield just littered with bodies.
Yeah. So many Greeks and Trojans on that day lay face down in the dust beside each other. I liked the little beside each other. In life, they were against each other, but in death, they are beside one another.
Right. They're the same. Like there's no...
Yeah.
Death doesn't care whether you're Greek or Trojan. It just cares that you're dead.
Yeah.
In the 4 books so far, in some ways we've seen 4 different ways fighting can happen, right? In book 1 and 2, it was all about politicking. In book 1, the politicking was among individuals. It was like the Achilles versus Agamemnon, like battle of words. In book 2, there's more politicking, but it's more among the armies, right? Like these troops are going to try and run away. These troops are going to try and stay. And so there's more politicking in there. Book 3, we turn to actual fighting. But it's, again, individual one-on-one, Paris and Menelaus. And now book 4, we turn to actual fighting between armies. And so we've seen the ways fighting can happen with words, fighting can happen with swords, fighting can happen between individuals, and fighting can happen between armies. And so these 4 books, I think, have now set up the full scope of all the ways that conflict will sort of manifests itself through the rest of the book. That'll wrap us up for our discussion of book 4. Again, if you're interested in reading along with us in preparation for next week, we'll post the book 5 audiobook. I'm recording Samuel Butler's translation, posting it to YouTube with the full text so you can read along and listen along if you would like.
Link to listen to book 5 in the description of this video. And yeah, we're just going to keep chipping away.
Yeah. If you've been enjoying this so far and you know other people who might, feel free to share it with them.
Yeah.
I think word of mouth is going to be the best way that our podcast spreads to other people.
Maybe. But give it a like and leave us a comment if you have questions. Or if you are an expert in Greek and have more to say about Greek, please let me know.
Or if we've gotten stuff horrifically wrong, please let us know kindly.
And if you are an expert in how Bronze Age warfare took place, I am highly interested. Please DM me.
Yes.
That'll be it for today. Happy reading.
Happy reading.